Okay, good evening. Um, how is everybody? Obviously, if you've been following the channel the last couple of weeks, you'll notice on the live streams. Then I've obviously made subscriber only mode for comments, and yeah, you've got to be subscribed for over now. It's designed to keep the trolls away, and it's doing its job. Obviously, Champions League and Europa League knockout stages are we're getting deep into them now, and obviously there's talk about who's going to win, that kind of stuff. Grand National this weekend, um, and a few other sporting bits and pieces. On the cricket side of things, Joe Root is England captain. His future is in a lot of doubt. There's question marks whether he'll be captain for the summer series against New Zealand, following on from two really poor Test series, only one win in 18 tests. So there's that. Frank Lampard and Everton after the 3-2 defeat at Burnley, and Sean Dyche's halftime team talk apparently is the news of the day in that regard. Everton are 1 point above relegation zone, and their goal difference is pretty shocking. And their form isn't great, and their away form is non-existent. They haven't won away since August. So Everton are really in serious trouble, and there's a clear separation between Everton and the teams above. So, is Frank Lampard, was he the right choice as manager? I would argue probably not. I would say stick with Rafa, but the fan base never really got behind Rafa, and well, yeah, see what's happened there. Obviously, round 5 of the NRL has kicked off today. The Manly Sea Eagles beating Newcastle away from home, 30 points to 6 in rather heavy rain up in Newcastle. That was actually quite a good game to watch. You've got the NRLW Grand Final, which does not have the Brisbane Broncos women's team in it for the first time ever, with the Sydney Roosters women's team against the St George Illawarra women's team. Yes, the Grand National is on Saturday. I am looking forward to it. Hopefully, the weather is good, and good conditions. But we have had some really heavy rain this week throughout the country, and so we'll see how the ground is. If it's very heavy ground, it could affect the racing. Everton in trouble? Yes, they are. They're in trouble for more than just Lampard being manager. The results haven't been good enough. But there's issues with the financial fair play and the loss, 135% losses over profit rule. So they're in breach of spending rules. There's issues over the future of the stadium, be it Goodison Park, or if they do decide to, they have planning permission for the new stadium, whether they actually break ground on it. The Usumov money being sanctioned and loss of sponsorship deals, and they are 1 point above the relegation zone. So yes, Everton are in serious trouble. I don't think Frank Lampard's the problem. The main problem, I think, much like Man United and much like Tottenham and a lot of other clubs, the structures of the day-to-day structures of the club and the running of the club is a massive part of the problem with Everton. And you could argue they've gone through a lot of managers since David Moyes in the last 7-8 years. A lot of managers, lack of stability, some really poor transfers, some really poor financial decisions, some questionable decisions financially, and they are what they are now. If they were to get relegated, I'm not sure they'll bounce straight back up from the Championship. Do I think Wales will be good again in rugby union? There's the issues with the domestic game is what's causing a lot of the problems that the Welsh find at the moment, and it is now starting to have the impact on the national side. Also, there's been question marks about Wayne Pivac since he was appointed. Yes, last year they had a very good Six Nations and they won the Six Nations, but in general, the form under Wayne Pivac hasn't really been great. There's been question marks over his appointment, but the national game, the union's in financial crisis, the regions are in financial crisis, the domestic Premiership in Wales is in financial crisis. I don't know what's going to happen with Wales. They have to, there needs to be structural changes within the union. There needs to be structural changes uh, you know, within the game itself. But they did try to put a fifth region, um, you know, another region outside the South of Wales, and it lasted a year. So the professional era in Welsh rugby's been a mess anyway. There's issues with talent development, scouting, um, the you know the centralised contracts, players having uncertain future. Attendances aren't great. The rebranding of the regions, whole host of issues. The fact that the Welsh Union have had to step in with the Dragons, the Newport Gwent Dragons, on the day-to-day running side of things, dropping the place names apart from Cardiff with the Ospreys and the Nrlw, they just dropped the place names, which didn't really endear locals to want to buy into the product. Um, yeah, a lot of issues. A lot of issues. I don't know where you pinpoint the problems, but professionalism has not been kind to Wales, and the state the game found itself in 20 years ago was a mess. The Every time rugby league in Wales tries to gain a foothold, the union put as much effort as possible into trying to kill that avenue of player development off, because even though it's league, you can still develop the same core basic skills, handling skills, tackling skills, the general rugby skills that both codes have. And they put a lot of effort and energy into killing off rugby league when they're not even focusing on fixing the problems within their own code. Welsh rugby fans don't like me, and I don't like them. So I'm not really have got a lot of sympathy for Welsh rugby fans. They don't support their regions. They don't support their local Premiership clubs. They come out in force for the internationals and pretend they give a toss, but they really don't. There's issues with the ticket pricing at the Principality. 10,000 empty seats against France. There's a lot of empty seats against Italy. A game they actually went on to lose. It doesn't matter that they lost to Italy. I think that's the problem. But there were it's just yeah, Welsh rugby fans are just a toxic bunch. I'm sure there's some nice Welsh rugby fans out there, but I find them an abhorrent group that I have no sympathy for with their current crisis within their domestic and international game. I have no sympathy for them. The abuse that I get from them is just they can fuck off. Basically, I don't normally tell a fan base to fuck off, but Welsh rugby fans, you can fuck off. If there are any Welsh rugby fans who will be watching this at some point, sorry, but you can fuck off, because there's too much toxicity within that fan base for me to have any sympathy for the situation the Welsh Union finds itself, the clubs find themselves, the regions find themselves, the sport in Wales in general. I have no sympathy. And when you've got commentators like Jonathan Davis, the scratchy little annoying little Welshman, whose views on rugby union and rugby league are so outdated because he's never decided to coach the game. He's just stopped playing. He retired in the 90s, hasn't done any coaching. I'm sorry, he can fuck off as well because he gives me a headache. In regards to will I be watching Britain versus Denmark, there'll be a geo block on YouTube, so I've got to find someone Premier Sports or Free Sports to watch the game because there'll be a geo block, which is absolutely frustrating. But I will try to. Blackburn 8, the Sky TV games, the TV curse, the live TV curse as we call it. We've had some injuries. To be fair, we're still better than what we were last season. I'm not going to lie. I think we're playing above ourselves. But yeah, we tend to have a sticky patch of form in every season, even the championship winning season and the League Cup winning seasons that we had. But we've come back to reality, to where the team's at. But this is 12 years of Venky's ownership has led to this. So the Sky TV curse is what the fan base is calling it, but we have had injuries. Some players have lost a bit of form and a bit of confidence. But it is what it is with Blackburn. The four teams would not finish highly in the Premiership. They'll get battered every week. They'll be the bottom four, maybe bottom six. I can't see the Welsh regions battling for the European places, and there's a lot of calls to merge the Welsh regions into the English game, but then you're disenfranchising. There's already problems with the fact they want to ring fence the Premiership and disenfranchise the Championship sides. You bring the Welsh Union regions in, you're going to disenfranchise the English game further, and there's already a lot of debate about the Premiership having a lot of power over the domestic game in England and salary cap breaches and other issues within the English game. Let's disenfranchise that further. Rugby union's in a mess. Let's be honest. Rugby union, and this is I keep going back to Augustine Pichot in 2019 in the build-up to the World Rugby election, and he said the wealth needs to be distributed more evenly, and the top-end talent needs to take a slight haircut to their salaries, so the rest of the professional talent can get a decent pay grade, and the game can be more financially stable. And they voted for Bill Beaumont. So you get what you vote for. Much like with this Tory government in this country. Yes, I've brought some politics into it. You get what you vote for, really. If you want to vote for unsustainable financial, you know, rugby union, Bill Beaumont's your man. If you wanted to go for sustainability, Augustine Pichot was your man, and they voted against him. So he was like, well, World Rugby is not listening to my warnings, I give up on the organisation. And I think he was right to do so. Do I think Jersey will join the French system? The problem is, geographically, most of the French clubs are in the southwest of France. So geographically, it still makes sense for them to be part of the English system. In saying that, it's up to the the Channel Islands as a collective, because not all the players actually are from Jersey. Some of them are actually from Guernsey as well, and Alderney and Sark. It'll be interesting, but they do come under the auspices of the RFU, so they would have to, I think, have the French Union and the English Union the RFU would have to have discussions about Jersey, because there would have to be a, where would you put Jersey in the French league system? The second division automatically, the French top flight automatically. It's an interesting concept, but the French league is the French league, and only French clubs play in the French league. The English league is the English league, and only English clubs play in that. And the Channel Islands is a bit of an awkward situation because you've got the French Channel Islands as well. I don't know where Jersey play. Honestly, I don't know where. It would have to make economic sense for whatever league they decide to stay in. They would have to be economically and financially viable. If they want to go for the French system, fine. If they want to stay in the English system, fine. But it would have to make economic sense for their decision. If it economically negatively impacts them, then it's the wrong decision, obviously. Yes, Boris Johnson's come out and stated what he stated about the trans athlete debate, and quite frankly, I actually for once agree with him. I never thought I would say this ever, but the left wing doesn't know what to do. I don't want to keep going on. The left wing doesn't have a clue, because the left plays identity politics to then blame the right, but the right, when it does talk common sense, it's a rare thing. But it is absolutely the right decision. Was it the UFC fighter who left the female fighter with brain damage or something and fractured her skull and nearly killed her? You've got the swimmer, the cyclist. I want to see women be successful at sport. I like watching the women's rugby league in Australia. I think that's come on massively this season. And they're expanding the game, and next year, 2 more teams join. The year after, 2 more teams. So they're growing the game professionally with the NRL clubs with the women's game in Australia. So honestly, they're better rugby players than I am, and they'll probably flatten me and batter me up because that's what they've been playing their entire adult lives. In regards to trans athletes, let them have their own category. If I'm quite honest, we have women's sport for women. We have men's sport for men. The women's rugby league has different rule variations to the men's because they're still predominantly amateur and the physicality is there. And so the women's NRLW is not actually exactly comparable to the men's NRL. There are rules specifically designed for women for athlete welfare. They have shorter halves. They don't have a 40-20. They have a 20-30 kind of kick or 30-20. So they've tailored the rules to suit the players. And until they reach the same level as the men on a professional standpoint with training, fitness, professionalism, they're going to keep slowly tinkering the rules, but make sure it is appropriate for the women's game. The public have got behind it. The viewership figures are going up, attendance figures are going up, because you're not comparing. Women's football could learn a lot I think, from the NRLW and the NRL and how they're doing it. But you've got to treat it as like a standalone sport. In regards to Johnson's statement, I think there should be a separate category for transgender athletes. It just stops a lot of the problems. And yeah, on a political standpoint, Labour plays identity politics, and the right wing feeds off that. But this is the problem: the left wing likes playing identity politics and blaming it on the right. So they get people fighting amongst themselves, and they go, "Here's your problem. This is what's causing it." Which in reality is not the case, because a pragmatic person or a person with a brain would neither vote right wing or left wing. But unfortunately, they're the two main parties in this country. Keir Starmer is I don't know what he is, um, you know. But when it comes to sport and politics, Sadiq Khan, as London Mayor, wants to attract Major League Baseball back to the capital from next year, because obviously they signed a 2-year deal for the Major League Baseball London series, and obviously 2020 didn't happen, and neither did 2021. And Major League Baseball won't be rushed on the decision. They are saying they will come back when they feel ready to do so. That's interesting. I wouldn't say women shouldn't just intimidate men's sports. I think women's cricket, they've tailored the rules, they've shortened the boundaries, but the basic rules are exactly the same. Women's rugby league, they've tailored the rules to slightly shorter halves, and they don't have the 40-20, they have the 20, the 30-20. So it's slight less distance on a kick to regain possession. But basically, the same basic rules apply. They've just tailored them slightly for the physicality and because most of the players are still part time. Same in women's rugby union. They've tailored some of the rules, but the basic principles are the same. Women's football could learn a lot from other sports that have tinkered the rules slightly to suit the physical attributes of the players playing it. But the basic rules are the same. The sport isn't alien. It's not completely different. I wouldn't say downhill skiing and slalom and super G, the women's courses on skiing events are actually slightly shorter than the men's. They're slightly shorter and have slightly less severe turns for a percentage of banking and things, but they're basically still black runs, super black runs, and they're still, if you're not a professional skier, will kill you. They're still the bobsleigh runs and luge runs are basically the same. In winter sports, women's ice hockey, they have different rules. No hitting, you can't. No fighting, you can't drill your opponent like you would do in the men's. But the actual length of play is the penalties are exactly the same. They just slightly tinker the rules to suit the fact that most female ice hockey players are amateur. They've got to wear cages. They can't wear visors. Other than that, the equipment's the same. The ice surface is the same. The rules are the same, apart from no hitting. That's it. Whereas in FIFA, with the women's football, they play with exactly the same rules. Exactly the same length of half, extra time, penalties. And I don't think the women's fitness and even though there's now professional leagues is on the same level, so the quality level is going to take a massive impact. But the women want it that way. Those women officials within the FA, UEFA, FIFA, they don't want to reduce the length of halves or have the rules changed because they fought so hard to be allowed to play at the top level because women's football was banned for so long. It's called sevens or nines. That's what rugby union, rugby league, the in between is sevens and nines. They've done it before. They've done hybrid games before. I've been listening to a lot of the Fergo and the Freak podcast on rugby league, and I've been listening to the episodes where they discussed the Super League, era. So the mid '90s, basically, when the game was on the knife edge of chaos, basically. And there were some initiatives where sevens and nines, sort of like a hybrid version of both codes, was being played, and there were players that were playing both. If there was a permanent hybrid that had rules set in stone, a governing body, and professional players playing, I could see it. but would it be attractive to fans? Because we have the Seven Circuit, and in rugby league you do have the international and NRL nines. So there is professional players playing in the nines in the NRL pre-season, and internationally you have the international nines, and of course you've got rugby sevens and the rugby seven circuit, and then also the clubs play a seven series in the pre-season. So we already have sort of the more skilled formats of both codes. Um, so that already exists. Infantino, look, it's like Sepp Blatter saying we should make the women's shorter. Did it happen? No. Will it happen? No, because you need to have how do I put it? A vote, and he's already on the back foot in regards to the 2-year World Cup cycle idea, saying it was actually a feasibility study, not it was going to happen. And I think you basically got a crook in charge of FIFA. They replaced Sepp Blatter with his crony. So whatever comes out of Infantino's mouth, I don't listen to, considering the more reports coming out of Qatar about further human rights abuses for the security staff. Um, Tells you all you need to know about FIFA's intentions for this World Cup. They've sanctioned Russia and Belarus, but they won't sanction Qatar for human rights. It's called money. Money talks with FIFA, and so yeah, I I don't listen to anything that comes out of Infantino's mouth. Player welfare is clearly not a concern for FIFA. It's getting as much money as possible. There are ways to improve the sport. So every time there's a stoppage, the clock stops. Um, every other sport does that. Football doesn't. It's mad. Um, but there's another report coming out that they might reduce game lengths to 60 minutes. Well, they should do that in the women's game, maybe, to fix a few issues in the women's game so the quality improves, and then you can add the length back on. But uh, uh, I don't like the fact that FIFA are suddenly tinkering a lot of rules here that have served the game well for since 1888, since the Football League was established. Um, and they haven't got VAR to work. They've got the interpretation of offside and handball completely wrong, which doesn't help with VAR being a mess. And brown paper envelopes have changed hands, so the World Cup's in Qatar, and they won't admit they should never have awarded there. But there we go. And football's got a lot of problems, and the problems that need addressing aren't being addressed, and problems that don't need addressing or are being made by the governing bodies. Just think to have professional women's rugby in England, could the Premiership and Super League merge under some hybrid code? I hope not, because the RFL can't manage anything. The Super League can't manage anything. The governance of rugby league is a joke, and the RFU have got a fair few issues themselves. And Premiership rugby, come on, how many more salary cap breaches are going to come to light? No, no. I wouldn't trust those in authority to govern the game correctly, because they can't govern it now. Hope I'm doing well. I'm doing all right. We've had a bit more crappy weather, a lot of heavy rain, and then we had some very nice strong winds today. So it was not overly pleasant, and we're short staffed as normal. So hey, welcome to being working class. I would be happy if you broke away from FIFA. If we do that, then I think football's worse off. You need UEFA and CONMEBOL to basically hold FIFA to account, basically with threatening to leave. If us and CONMEBOL were actually to leave, I think, it'd be probably more damaging, because then you've got a division within the game that's open, and that doesn't own any good. Don't get me wrong, some rule changes are good. The back pass rule, for example, have too many will hurt the game. Yeah, I think absolutely. This is what annoyed me with the NRL the last couple of seasons. Was I understand the rule changes they've made, however they made them too many too quickly, and this season they finally got it right. I think with the actual in play rule changes. Some of the other issues with the HIA protocols and what the bunker looks at, video ref is another thing. But the last 2 years worth of rule changes, this is what we should have had to begin with. So they finally got it right. in the third season of rule changes, when it was 3 years of constant. It's been constant rule changes, and it. Well, I understand why they did them, and I'm in favour of those rule changes. Um, yeah. How is Joe Root still England Test captain? It's the ECB. I wouldn't trust them to uh, organise a piss up in a brewery or an orgy in a brothel. That's the best way I can describe the ECB and how they run the game of cricket in this country. In fact, all cricketing governing bodies, the ICC, the whole lot of them. I wouldn't trust them to organise a swingers party in a sex club. Um, how I don't know. One test win in 18 tests, managing to draw the first two tests against the West Indies from winning positions, celebrating a draw in the fourth test of the Ashes like they'd won the whole thing. He was never. I don't think he was ever the right guy to be captain anyway. And technically, on if we're going by percentage of wins, he has the worst winning percentage of any England captain. That includes Tony Gregg, and Tony Gregg had a shocking win percentage as England captain. Kevin Peterson had a shocking win percentage. He's worse than those two, and they weren't even English. So work that one out. They're both Saffers. So the two South African captains we had have a better winning record percentage wise than Joe Root. Joe Root has actually won less than half the tests that he has captained, which is ridiculous. Um, it's almost the same. Who should be? I think in the short term, for at least the rest of this calendar year, Stuart Broad, until a permanent long term replacement can be found. That's what Tony Gregg sort of did when he was captain. He was a temporary England captain because they knew it was a short term fix. Although he was on a permanent basis. When Tony Gregg was England captain, that was sort of a similar thing. He was in there for a very short period of time while a long term captain was figured out. Not taking Broad and Anderson to the West Indies clearly was a mistake. And Stuart Broad was right in his "why have I been left out" questions, because he can bat a bit in the tail and shore up the tail, and he can get wickets consistently. Same with Jimmy Anderson. You've got two good night watchmen there, and could two lower order batsmen who can bat a bit, and even though they're veterans, and Jimmy Anderson's nearly, I think he's 40 now. He's nearly 40. He can still take 5 to 10 wickets a series, so he can still chip away at a batting lineup and bowl important overs, so your better, younger, faster strike bowlers can attack. Not taking Sam Curran, just the best, most promising player we have, young player we have. Is he injured? Not taking any of the Curran brothers, to be fair. Beyond me, because they're all young, talented, and driven, and they want to improve, and they are showing good early growth signs of all being capable all rounders. I'm Jofra Archer. I believe he was injured for the Ashes, but not taking him to the West Indies. He was brought up on West Indian wickets. We have no other fast bowlers who are of a decent standard. So selection, Joe Root has a big input on selection because he's England captain, and the fact that Ben Stokes, vice captain, has actually admitted that he doesn't really pay much attention in team briefings. He's part of the leadership group. Tells me there's a lot of problems there. KP Peterson is a cunt. Never liked him. He's one of those plastic players that almost every international test side of any sport seems to have at least one or two plastics who are not ever got any they've got tenuous links to the country they play for. The South Africans didn't want him, so we ended up with him. And then he proved to be a very divisive character when we had him. Talented though he is, he's not a very well liked individual within the sport. He's not. Doesn't matter how talented you can be as an athlete. Granted, you don't have to win yourself many friends. You do get some big egos in there, but he's not very well liked in the sport in general. Not just by teammates going, "Oh, he's a very powerful character." Bit of friction there because we're all driven to win. No. Even by other people in cricket, he is not liked. Hence why have you noticed he doesn't do a lot of commentary and get a lot of guest interviews with other cricket commentators and ex-players. They don't want to have him anywhere near them. He is really, really really not a nice particular character. And Yeah, he was very toxic in the dressing room. You can have players not get on with each other, like Andy Cole and Teddy Sheringham, one of the best strike partnerships in the Premier League in 1999. They hated each other. Brilliant on the field. They could set aside their personal differences on the field. In the changing rooms, um, they didn't talk to each other. But Alex Ferguson realised on the field they were very disruptive. And then Dwight York was the mediator in the changing room and on the training pitch. If they didn't talk, Dwight York was, and Solskjaer were the mediators that would relay instructions of where they wanted the ball passed and the moves they got to make. On the field, it worked. Training ground, dressing room, outside of the game, didn't socialise, didn't like each other. Ah, Um, other high-profile athletes that you feel are unjustly disliked or hated? No, if they're generally hated, they're generally hated for a reason, and quite a good justification. Cameron Smith in the NRL, there were certain things that rubbed people up the wrong way about him, and while he is the greatest player that's ever played the game for stats, apart from Adrian Morley when it comes to actual first-grade appearances, um, the salary cap scandal, the diamond ring that his wife got from Todd Greenturd, which went down poorly on his 300th, was it 300th or 400th game or something like that. Some of the way he got away with not getting suspended for some foul play. There was a player who got paralysed. There was an issue. He's a yeah. The ostracisation of Cooper Cronk. Cameron Smith's. Neymar deserves to be hated because he just constantly brings the game into disrepute with his antics. Ronaldo, don't like Ronaldo. He's an arrogant. Yeah, one of the best players of all time. Absolutely. Do I like him? No. Messi, I think again similar. Just similar. Again, one of the best of all time. Absolutely. Players that I do like, Lewandowski. I think he's underrated. Ibrahimovic. You got to hate to love him. Basically, he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I love Ibrahimovic because he just speaks his mind. We don't. We need more characters like Zlatan Ibrahimovic. You just don't care what comes out of their mouth, and they tell it how it is. Gavin Henson, don't like him. Um, Ultimately, a very talented player. There was no doubt on Gavin Henson being a very talented outside centre, but he was a bit up himself. Um, but in regards to players, North American athletes, LeBron James, he's a divisive character. He's not overly as well liked as I think he would like to be, but he's very ego driven. Any of the Chicago Bulls of that era with Michael Jordan and co. I think a lot of NBA players, the Dream Team and all that. There was obviously Michael Jordan, and I took that personally. That meme. Yeah, I mean, look, you don't go into professional sport to win friends. Let's just say that you go there to win. Um, Lance Armstrong was well known to be a bit of a dick, and he admitted, yeah, his time in the Tour de France and his doping, yeah. Um, he wasn't universally liked by his teammates. So yeah, you could argue that. What else? It's quite obvious that Joe Root dropped Broad and Jimmy because they challenged him on and off the field, and they know what it takes to win, and Joe Root doesn't. Simple. I do understand of obviously getting young players into the squad, and obviously because they're veterans, they're not going to be able to play it in the same intense level they would have done 10, 15 years ago, and then giving some young players a chance so that you're grooming the young players to replace the veterans who are close to retirement. But leaving them out was an absolute disaster. Gareth Bale, don't like Gareth Bale, and the Spanish media don't like him. But his relationship's been a bit toxic with a lot of people. Um, yeah, yeah, it's a difficult one. I'm not a fan of Tom Brady though. I even said like on my Tom Brady comes out retires and then comes out retirement videos. I've done 2 videos on Tom Brady. Yes, he's the most successful quarterback in the Super Bowl era. Doesn't mean he's the most liked. And I mentioned some of the Patriots, Deflate Gate, videotape gate. Um, he Tom Brady's a bit of a divisive figure, ironically. You either love him or hate him. I'm not a fan of Brady, to be fair, or the Patriots, but that's my thing. Um, Ronaldo, I think Ronaldo is. I never really liked Ronaldo though. There was no doubt he's undoubtedly skilled and a lot of you know. But I prefer some of his contemporaries in the Portuguese side of the late '90s and the early 2000s, like your Luis Figos, Maniche, Nuno Gomes, Rui Costa. I found them more lovable, even though England suffered at the hands of them in the Euros and World Cups. I still found them more lovable than Ronaldo, especially Luis Figo and Rui Nuno Gomes, two of my favourite Portuguese players. Um, and of course, Nuno Gomes played at Blackburn for a little bit, so I have a little bit of love there. But we'll see what happens. Ten Hag, he's been heavily linked with the Man United job. Advanced talks now, and it looks like Maguire and Ronaldo could be on the way out of United and could be victims if of a clear out. But United need a clear out. They need a culture shift. But I think more of the problem doesn't lie with necessarily the playing squad. It's the structures of the club with the Glazier ownership. So, and obviously Louis van Gaal is going to be replaced by Ronald Koeman in the Dutch job, and of course he's undergoing cancer treatment right now. So the fact he's still willing to coach the World Cup as well, fair play to Louis van Gaal. Well, I'm not overly keen on his managerial style. The fact he's still willing to go to work day in day out with cancer, I mean, fair play to him. And the fact he's going to be going to the World Cup with prostate cancer, man, his age, that's a big killer. So yeah, fair enough. Fair play to Louis van Gaal. Most underrated athlete in general, past or present. Depends what sport we're discussing. Quite frankly, underrated. That's a difficult one. It depends what sport we're discussing. It really does. Juan Martin Del Potro in tennis, I think he was criminally underrated. He obviously retired because his knee just gave up. He's had, I think, 5 knee surgeries or something, 5 knee replacements. Fair play to him. Yeah, that's a difficult one because I think there are. I would say Muzzy is it as an English player and playing for Turkey for well, because he couldn't get the England side in the '90s. Muzzy is it was a very underrated midfielder for Leicester City back in the day. Two guy for Blackburn as a football player was criminally underrated. One Pedro Mendes used to play for Portsmouth and Rangers. He had a rocket of a shot. Mendieta and Zenden, I think they were 2 very good players. Criminally underrated. It's a difficult one though because there's been so many great football players. Rugby, I would say Andy Goode and Hodgson, 2 England fly halves that were overshadowed by Johnny Wilkinson. I would say Gordon Darcy as an Ireland centre was underrated because of Brian O'Driscoll on his outside centre channel. The Bergamasco brothers for Italy in rugby union were underrated a little bit, and the younger Bergamasco could play multiple positions in the back line. It's a difficult one. Very, very difficult. I couldn't. Underrated snooker player. Ooh. You see, I've tuned out of snooker in recent years. I really have. and I think a lot of the players playing right now on any given day can beat each other in the ranking tournaments. It's not like it used to be where it's like the top 10 or top 20 were the ones that were going to win. It's now anyone could be anyone in the top 100. So you've got unranked players outside the top 100 winning ranking events now as well. Got a massive spider up there, really bugging me. Gonna have to remove him at some point. Um, Scott, Scottie Pippen until the Last Dance came out. Yes, that's basketball, isn't it? I think looking back on certain. By the way, have you seen the stuff about Eddie coaching in Japan again? When England have performed so poorly and quite a few need players in ring, and he should be watching Premiership matches. Um, the whole Eddie Jones discussion. We know his replacement is going to be English after the next World Cup, which I think is a big statement from the RFU. But he's half Japanese, so I have no problem with that, quite honestly. And seeing Japan and develop its test side and its professional game, I think is a good thing. I think it's a good thing. The way the Sunwolves were treated by the Super Rugby system was shambolic. Um, so there's that. What sport do you think will make its way to the UK market, or is it a sport? Unfortunately, the media is heavily weighted towards association football, and of course, both codes of rugby come in second place. If you took football out, the most popular sport is rugby. They don't say which code when it comes to surveys, so we'll assume both codes are lumped together in that kind of what you participate in. So there's where your heavily biased media rights go. Um, Most of the professional and semi-pro sports are very well established. So it's very hard to break in. Look at how hard ice hockey's found it, and that's been an established sport in this country since, well, we invented it. Just the Canadians made it better, and we've won Olympic medals and gold medals today in ice hockey. We've had several iterations of professional leagues, and some of the teams have been established since the 30s. Yes, we've had professional ice hockey teams since the 30s in this country. Um, But the issue is we don't have a universal UK ice hockey governing body because you've got Scotland and then England, and they're separate. And then you've got the Elite League, and then the National League, and then the Scottish League. And it's just, they need to have one body like every other country does, but we don't. Um, and and that is an established sport, but it's still classed as a minority sport. So there you go. Rugby league has got massive problems. Cricket's got massive problems. Rugby union's got massive problems. Football, every professional sport in this country's got massive issues, and a lot of it's to do with money. But if a new sport was to break in, it's going to find it very, very difficult because even ice hockey is established, and all the sports I've mentioned have TV deals of some kind with a broadcaster as a majority broadcaster. So Premier Sports with ice hockey, rugby league. It's predominantly Sky, although Channel 4 have got rights and BBC have got rights. The Premier League is split between BT Sport and Sky Sports, and then the FA Cup is on the ITV and BBC and Amazon. Cricket's on Sky and BT, and as games on BBC as well. Then you've got the 100, which is not cricket; it's just a farce. So the established sports are on both subscription and free-to-air channels, and I've got long-term TV deals and media deals in place. Then they've got their social media imprint, and I think all the sports have got better social media imprint than TV deals, in my opinion. They utilise social media better than the TV deals they have. Who knew that YouTube you could watch stuff? Uh, yeah, I think a new professional. I mean, and people are talking about the NFL. They keep coming to London. The London series. The NFL plans to have a professional team, and that's still technically a discussion point within the NFL is having a professional team in London. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars have committed to London until 2024. So that means we've got 3 more seasons of the Jacksonville Jaguars losing in London and being pointless and one of the worst teams in the NFL. Of course, their owner owns Fulham. a team that can't stay in the Premier League for more than a couple of seasons and yo-yo, and they're too good for the Championship, but not good enough for the Premier League, and they're dodgy ownership. Yeah, and they're under investigation for things, but that's not it. And the NFL has always stated it plans, and this is true, that they want a professional team in London. If the Jacksonville Jaguars move to London permanently, you are importing a crap team that can't win. And how long will the British fan base tolerate a crap team that can't win? Because they've only appeared in the playoff postseason, what, five, six times in their entire history or something like that, and only 3 times under the current ownership or something bizarre. They've got they've never appeared in the Super Bowl. They've never won the Super Bowl. I don't think they've ever won a playoff game. So they really are a terrible team. Crap. They can't even draw fans at home in Jacksonville. So, and we couldn't make this up. Really couldn't. And they're the most likely team to relocate. Now, surprisingly, the NFL is only a 30-team league. The NHL has 32. So there's other sports that they could, expand to 2 more teams. But they've been coming to London as a league since 2007. So they've had a long time, 15 years and 14 seasons, because obviously 2020 didn't happen, of bringing the product on a permanent basis to our shores. Is it 30? I thought it was 30 teams in the NFL. I thought it was 30. Okay. Well, in that case, they're going to have to relocate to Jacksonville. And I can't see the British public supporting a losing team very long term. And then you've got to factor in a whole load of economic things, and will fans bother to show up? Because Wembley's a nightmare to get to on a weekend because engineering works, and we don't have a 24-hour transport system because it doesn't work Monday to Friday because there's always on strike or delays or the weather's crap or whatever. Yeah, I've PSG guys just I'm not a big fan of non-American sports being Americanized at all, and there are laws in France against that. There's actual anti-Americanization laws in France to preserve French culture. So as a French club, that's really interesting. It shows where football's gone, and there's again too much money. And what is ironic is the North American fans actually like the way we run our sports, which is why they watch them, because it's different and it's traditional. It's just the guy doesn't live in the real world, and the Arab nations seem to think the American way is the best way to do things. It's not. Have they learned nothing from the last 30 years of history with the Gulf region, with American democracy and blowing the shit out of it? No. I like the fact that we have the sports the way we have them in Europe. I do. And we don't reward failure as much. It's a thing. If you're crap, you get relegated, and then after the parachute payments stop, you have to try and really work your way back up. It's called promotion relegation. The Americans can't grasp this concept. They are starting to. We are educating them. It's taken some time. But the European Super League debacle and how the fans responded. Even the North American fans were against the European Super League and basically told American owners, we don't like this. Stop. So the American fans actually are buying into how us Europeans run our sports. Who would have thought we invented them all? Who knew? You can tell that my cynicism and sarcasm this evening. I've been watching some Top Gear, old Top Gear with Clarkson. Who knew? Could be worse. What could possibly go wrong? No, I'm not. I don't watch the Super Bowl for the halftime show. That's if I was watching the Super Bowl, that's the point, the half hour of my life or the hour of my life that I do other things. Um, um, yeah, yeah. Franchise system and the draft system does create lazy teams and rewards failure. I don't like it. Um, and they're trying to bring in rules to stop tanking. I remember the Buffalo Sabres tanking for Matthews and they get Eichel. They still can't make the playoffs. And the Maple Leafs can't get out of the first round. So did that really benefit either side? Probably not. Um, or McDavid or whatever it was. The, I think I yeah, Americanization of sports. There are certain things I do like the NHL. I don't like how their draft system works. I am critical of it. If it's called a draft lottery, every team should be part of that lottery because the lottery draft system rewards failure. And even though they've changed the lottery percentages and the rules, you can still tank to get it. And if you've got a stacked draft, you can still tank. And it's painful to watch teams literally not GMs deliberately put a crap team together. It's painful. I feel sorry for Arizona fans this season, and the Seattle Kraken and the Buffalo Sabres are always crap. But Montreal, worst team in the league, right? But I do feel sorry when fans want to see their team try their best, and the players obviously want to win. There's no doubt on that. The players want to win. The coaches want to win. But the team owners and GMs were like, but we can get the number one draft pick. You shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket for a number one draft pick. You should build a team that works together, that can win together. So the draft system's flawed because you're losing for one player. When in reality, if you're smart, like Stevie Eiserman, you can build a winner with Tampa, and you can then do things with Detroit where you don't need an first overall draft pick. You pick up good quality young players, and then you build a winning culture where you're the sum of all your parts. You can have some superstars, but everyone has to buy into what the end goal is. So that's where the draft system is flawed. Is losing to get one player. It just doesn't work. Um, in regards to, I think Russia and Russian sports will still be affected when Russia is allowed to return. I think the impacts on Russian and Belarusian uh, athletes and teams is going to be felt for a very long time. They're still technically banned from Olympic sport. They have to compete as neutral athletes since the Sochi Games and the doping scandal that came out because of that. So um, it's going to be a very long time in that regard. F1 will die in a few years because of this cheap fake crap. I stopped watching F1 years ago, partly because of the shit TV deal that ironically Bernie Ecclestone signed, not Liberty Media. But I think looking at the price you've got to pay for Sky Sports on top of your Sky package for Sky Sports F1, I think it's 18 quid or something extra you've got to pay on top of the existing Sky Sports package. People's bills going up, less disposable income. That's gonna have an impact. Um, in regards to the Russian women being in the Euros, that's a delayed tournament by a year. They'd already qualified for that. Although there is a precedent of Yugoslavia being kicked out of the '92 men's Euros and replaced with Denmark. So just because they're still in it doesn't mean they will be. Will American baseball ever recognise its European influences, or will they continue to lie and say the sport was invented by a civil war general who didn't even enjoy outdoor recreation? Um, Look, the Americans claim they've invented everything. No offense, Dan. They claim they invented the cinema. That was the French. They claim they invented the motor car. That was the Germans. Um, they claim they invented basketball. That was a Canadian. Technically, a Scots-Irish guy, a Brit. Yeah, that's the thing. They claim they invented everything. They didn't. It's a thing. Um, Most inventions came from European nations. It's a thing. In regards to sport, the only sport that America claim it's invented as North America's continent is lacrosse, and that was the natives before the smallpox epidemics that the US gave them, killed them all. I don't know about netball and basketball. What I do know is basketball was invented by a Canadian who was actually not actually Canadian. He was born here and emigrated to Canada. But that's another thing. Ice hockey, British invention. That was made better by the Canadians, and then the Americans ruined it. um, no, I mean, look, I think Major League Baseball's got enough issues about, regardless of the origins of the sport. I think the sport is in crisis, and while this collective bargaining agreement that they've agreed a few weeks ago means that today is opening day, they're actually starting their delayed season. I think the players will go on strike before the end of the CBA in the next 5 years. I think the players just we want to get paid. Let's get some money. Let's earn some money. But I can tell from the reports coming out, the Players Association wasn't happy because they basically told their members not to vote for it. The players were like, apathy. We reached a point where we're not getting paid. We need to get paid. But I can see the players weren't technically overly happy with what they were offered. They just wanted to earn money again. But I can see there being further disenfranchisement, considering they earn twice as much as the NHL, yet they're still earning less for basic salary. The Inventor of Basketball sent the rules to an English person, and they've had netball from those rules. There you go. And the US aren't very good at netball. Yeah, the Americans claim they're the best at everything, and they're really not. They can't even deal with the metric system. We can. But yeah, no. Everything about American broadcasting, sports, it's very tacky. It's very cheap. It's cheap feeling, but very in your face. And that doesn't really. This is why I've it's very brash. It's very in your face. It's loud and yeah. It's the thing. Rounders actually comes from cricket, which is an English thing. We invented golf. The Americans ruined that. I said to an American, imagine playing rounders for a living, and he said, fuck you and your pub. I'm sorry, we don't drink watered down beer. We drink pure strength. The American alcohol is watered down. They can't handle their liquor. It's hilarious. They come over here and they just really can't handle it. It's so funny. A lot of atmospheres at American sporting events is very manufactured as well. I've noticed very manufactured, very yeah. They don't get as rowdy as we do. There's not a lot of passion behind their atmosphere. It's very manufactured. It's almost soulless in a way. They don't get spontaneous passion. It's very manufactured. But yeah, imagine playing rounders for a living and he said, "Fuck you in your pub." Didn't see the band. Didn't see the banter though. Yeah. Some American fans in sports are humble, others on the other. Yeah, look, Americans and alcohol don't mix at sporting events, and their alcohol is really weak strength. I've had American beer; it's the strongest beer in America is like 4%. Yeah, there was a beer I had in London that was a strong one on tap, and it was like 8.5%. And then we've got special brews, which can go up to like 15% before they're classed as wines for tax purposes, and spirits. And yeah, and then we've got ciders and perries and stuff, and they just get really. I remember I'd finished. I'd been at an ice hockey match. I was at the pub with a mate after the game, and there was some Americans in, and obviously they had a conference the next day on the Monday, and they're at the bar, and I they take the piss out of me for drinking McGuinness, and I was like, well, what are you drinking then? And they're like, oh, we don't know. We haven't decided yet. Well, they've got the guest, the guest ales and the guest ciders and stuff. It was spoons. My mistake. Weatherspoons. Yeah. But it's cheap. And I recommended they drink Old Rosie, which is quite potent. Quite a potent cloudy cider. About 8 or 9%. 4 pints in, they're fucked. I'm still, I'm 10 pints in. I'm still standing. Yeah, I recommended that. They couldn't get up. They were hammered. It was really funny. Uh, really funny. But I don't drink anymore. I don't miss drinking, but I miss some of the. There are some funny tales, but Americans can't handle their drink, and drinking sports with Americans is just a bad mix. Um, Especially come World Cup time when they're in Europe. And we serve full strength beer and full strength wine and full strength spirits. And yeah, the Canadians topped their qualifying group by some distance, and were superior to them in goal difference, like goals scored and goals against, better defence, better attack. They scored some better quality goals. They had better build-up play. They're coached by an Englishman. What do you expect? European coached them, and they're best in the group. So yeah, um, I think the Canadians will do quite well at their first World Cup since 1986. The journey that team has been on to get where they are, it's a great story. If you actually watch the documentaries and watch the interviews, jokes aside, the Americans failing to make the last World Cup was a big shock to their system. Big shock to their system. Bear in mind, they're co-hosting the next World Cup with the Canadians, so you want to be a bit careful how you talk to your neighbours. But they are very dismissive of the north of the border types. I think they're all left-wing communists because they have universal healthcare. Who knew? And kids don't get shot in schools all the time. Um, yeah, I mean, I love the MLS as a product. It is actually quite a decent quality league. It's a very open style of play. A bit less structured than the European style that can be a boring one or a boring 0-0 tactical stalemate. It's a bit more fun to watch the MLS. I will admit that. Plus, there's some Latin American influence with the Mexican and Central American players that play in the US, where there's a lot of flair and skill. But yeah, I don't rate the quality of their national setup. There's issues with their national setup because the MLS is not governed by US soccer. It's not like the FA that has an overriding remit over the Premier League and the EFL. That they have to meet FA rules. So the MLS is governed separately by a board of governors because it's a franchise system, much like the other major leagues, and so the governance is different. And there's not a lot of American coaches coaching in Europe, so it's it is interesting. Don't get me wrong; they have like Pulisic, and is a great player, and they have had great, like Rayner and other players in the past who Brian McBride and Tim Dempsey. They've had some, really good players. How do they cope with it? They don't. They don't quite understand how football works just yet. They're still learning. Yeah, the Nations League. Look, this is a problem where US soccer, so their FA, and the MLS are two different governing bodies, and unfortunately, they're part of CONCACAF, and so their best bet to get friendlies is with South American opposition. I would have thought with CONMEBOL. Um, so I UEFA governs the European. We can't have any friendlies. There's not enough um, because the World Cup's been played in winter. There's not enough of a window to jam all these international games in. So we've had to adjust the international window to suit when the World Cup is. If the World Cup was in the summer like it's meant to be, then that's different. The international calendar over the last 4 years would have suited a summer World Cup. Because the World Cup is in winter, we've had to adjust the international calendar. Plus, COVID as well has had an impact by delaying the Euros and then having a very condensed World Cup qualifying, which has obviously cost Italy its spot in the World Cup because of the condensed qualification for said World Cup. It's a global game, and all these were already scheduled in when it was announced that it was going to be a Winter World Cup. So they schedule these things like 2-3 years in advance. This is the interesting thing. These things are already planned 2-3 years on a calendar. They have to fit in a 4-year cycle. Then you have the Euros, and because the Euros was delayed by a year, that put added pressure on the World Cup qualification. And because play was suspended in 2020, we've had a very chaotic last 2 years of football. In fact, all sports very chaotic. And I think North American internationals, the US rugby team is declining, is hasn't qualified for the World Cup yet for next year. Canada's not in the World Cup, the Rugby World Cup next year. I do think they are stuck. I think they're stuck in 2014 when Tim Howard had a brilliant World Cup in Brazil with a record, number of saves in a game and shots faced. I do think they're stuck 8 years in the past. Jurgen Klinsmann did great things for that US national side. There is no doubt Jurgen Klinsmann and some big name players going to the MLS has definitely grown the sport over there. There's no doubt that. It's still a growing league, and they're expanding and getting record crowd numbers, and fans are buying it. No doubt of that. And the amount of kids playing the game is much higher now than what it was 20 years ago. There's no doubt. Domestically, the game is growing massively. The talent pool is growing massively. You've got players like Pulisic coming through, who otherwise would have probably chosen a different sport had it not been for the growth of the MLS and the interest in the European leagues. Pulisic would have played a different sport. There was no doubt that he's a quality athlete who I have no doubt could be playing baseball, ice hockey, maybe being a place kicker in the NFL. There is no doubt that Pulisic is definitely a talented athlete who could try his hand at any sport, and he would have been lost to another sport had it not been for the growth of the MLS and the interest in European football. And what Jurgen Klinsmann did for the national side and the structures he put in place, he's been highly critical of the direction the national team has taken over the last 4 to 6 years, and the direction they've taken and the quality, not getting there. What David Beckham's done for the sport in the US, he's energized the fan base into supporting the MLS, and he's, because of him taking that step to LA Galaxy, Ibrahimovic, Andrea Pirlo, Kaká, Gerrard, Lampard, these top quality European and South American players going over to play in the MLS help grow the product and grow the interest. Now he's set up his own team. Inter Miami aren't doing very well, but he's still building the sport in the US. So without European and South American influence, the US aren't on this level at all. And these are world-class players and coaches that have got involved in the domestic game in the US, be it playing, coaching, setting up teams. Without the European and South American influence on the MLS, you don't have the growth of the sport in the US. And to a certain extent, Canada, but Canada will buy into any sport because that's what the Canadians are like. They will just happily buy in and give it their best, regardless of the quality. They will happily participate. The Americans, it's a difficult one. You need a parent born in the US. Is it different in other countries? What to represent? It's called the grandparent rule or residency. So basically, under international rules right now, you either need to have a grandparent from said country or residency. So Diego Costa, for example, was actually a Brazilian, but he plays for Spain. He did also, qualified by residency, and he could swap allegiance because there's a cap ruling. You don't actually necessarily need a parent born in the US, ironically. You just have to be an American citizen to represent the US at international level. Because the US is an immigrant society, much like Australia and New Zealand. Ironically, a lot of the US national side in past World Cups have actually been born and raised in Germany because of a parent or both parents being US Army or Navy or Air Force personnel. I think you'll find. which is really interesting. Jose Altidore, he's from Haiti, no parent born in the US. Uh, I the issue on a rugby standpoint, yes, Chile have a very good chance of beating the US over two legs in the qualification playoff. Uruguay easily beat the US handsomely. Canada's been in a tailspin for years, and again, the issue is Major League Rugby is a combined league where you've got teams in the Canadian and US markets. And the issue is USA Rugby and Canada Rugby don't govern the Major League Rugby. It's a franchise league, much like the MLS. So there's two sets of governance, which is a problem. So, and yeah, it's growing in popularity, absolutely. But it is lower down the participation. However, US sports fans have bought into, especially rugby league and AFL, because they were the first major professional sports leagues that have international TV, agreements. In 2020, they were the first recognised major. I mean, yes, some of the Oriental baseball leagues started up sooner, like Japan and stuff, but the NRL was the first recognisable sports league to resume play in 2020, followed by the AFL. They led the way in resumption to play. So there you go. And Chile has got a great history in rugby union. Same with Uruguay, and even Peru, and Brazil got a national side, and they have massively improved from where they were in the pure amateur days, and they've got professional players, and they are playing at a high standard. And Uruguay is clearly leading the way in the Americas as the second best team in the Americas after Argentina, and they've got a very small player pool. And rugby union isn't the national sport in Uruguay or in Argentina. Polo is the national sport of Argentina, and Uruguay is obviously football. With the history in that sport, and they've got a very small population base, and they're easily dominating. The Americans should be a powerhouse. It beggars belief how far behind they are in global team sports. Ice hockey is a global team sport because it's very popular in Europe, and even in Japan there's a professional league. And yes, the US are very good at ice hockey. In the IIHF, they've got a great history in the Olympics and great history in the World Championships. Other international team sports like rugby, rugby league, and football, they are lagging behind, which is ridiculous with the population base and the interest in the European, Australasian sports leagues. You would think that they would have developed better than what they are. And so the issue is with how American sports leagues are structured. It is a franchise model. So the governing body doesn't actually govern the main sports league. That's the league governs itself, and that's where the division is. And that, I think, is what's holding back USA Rugby, USA Football, is Major League Rugby and Major League Soccer, much like the NHL, because they're played in two countries, the US and Canada. You've got two governing bodies that govern the national sides, and then you have the league governing body that governs the domestic game. And that's where the problems lie, is you've got two layers of governance that are separate, that don't necessarily coordinate very well with each other. And that's a massive, massive problem. And this is where the differences in Europe, where our FAs are part of UEFA, and they're technically the governing bodies that actually set a lot of rules that the domestic leagues have to follow. Even though the domestic leagues have their own governing bodies, they are still superseded by the domestic FAs or the domestic unions, such as the RFU with rugby union. You've got the various ice hockey governing bodies. You've got the ECB with cricket. You've got the RFL, Super League. Rugby League is a bit more of a mess, but even so, the governing bodies are still a superior governing body to the league governing body. Youth players play multiple sports encouraged in the UK. Yes. At school, I played association football. I played cricket. I played field hockey. I played rugby league and rugby union and a bit of Aussie rules because we had some overseas teachers from Australia, so that was kind of cool. So I played multiple sports. There were kids I went to school with who were at rugby union academies, football academies. I think there was one lad that was at the London Broncos Academy as well that I played with. Um, so I think, but that's on our sports curriculum. Whereas certain high schools in the US will focus on ice hockey. If it's, let's say, Minnesota, it would be an ice hockey or American football program, basketball in certain high schools, baseball in others. So it varies, but in the UK, especially in Europe, you play multiple sports. Um, so I know in the US, a high school system will focus on one particular sport: basketball, ice hockey, American football, baseball. A lot of them are now playing what you would call soccer, we call football, and some are even picking up rugby union and rugby league. But when it comes to US youth sport, it's geared towards college, collegiate, and the collegiate scholarships you can get with the NCAA, and then professional. Whereas over here, clubs have a big input with their academies, so it's different. Um, uh, so yeah, the US is completely different when it comes to sports education. You get sports scholarships. High schools will focus on an American football program or a ice hockey program if it's like Minnesota or Wisconsin because it gets kind of cold in winter. Um, you'll have a baseball program, probably in a Florida, or basketball program, probably in a Florida high school or Arizona high school. So it does honestly vary. I know that for a fact. But there's also these high schools will have links to sports scholarships with universities in the NCAA system. So it's sort of a production line. And of course you've got March Madness with the basketball and all that. But yeah, it does. It's a different culture because the professional sports teams in Europe will have sports academies, so they will scout the best talent from school, and they'll send scouts out to school matches. And also, if they're really good, their parents might get them in the academy from a very very young age. Um, so there you go. Unless you're Bo Jackson or Michael Jordan, it's probably just time consuming to focus on more than one past high school. Yeah, the US is to a certain extent the case, but the US especially is quite unique when it comes to sports participation. Um, you generally focus on the one sport, partly because of the high school programs that are in place, and then the collegiate programs that are in place. There are very few who do multiple sports at collegiate level or high school level, and it's a cultural thing. Um, Everywhere else that I've come across in Europe, especially, it's you've got a choice of sports at school, and then if you wish to outside of school sign up for a team, um, the local sports club will happily have you because it's more of a community based rather than franchise based system. So it's different. I have been following the transgender debate in sports. I'm a very open minded person and pragmatic, and for once I agree with Boris Johnson. Said that. The Labour Party doesn't know what to say on this because they play identity politics, whereas the Tories play populist politics. But in this case, the female athletes are taking a stand and are not comfortable with it. It doesn't make them homophobes or transphobes. It just means they're realists. So there we go. The Bees, they made the playoffs. They're still playing out of Slough. I'm wearing some Bees gear. They made the playoffs on the last game of the season. I don't think they do much in the playoffs, which is not a good enough team. Um, um, but yeah, a bit of a nail biting season. I've been following every game on social media. A good friend of mine, my mate Sam's been to the majority of home games and some away games, and has kept me up to date with score lines and players suspended and injuries. Uh, I think. Um, I think next season we'll see what players get signed, and we'll see what happens going forward next season. I think this season they're in the playoffs. It's going to be interesting if they get out of their playoff bracket with how it's structured. And of course, the Bristol Pitbulls will be joining the National League from next season, which is good. So that's positive. It's a shame Hull have obviously not rejoined. It is what it is. But yeah. I'm pretty sure Canada Women's Gold Olympic team has a male-born player on their team. I wouldn't know. Um, I played football and rugby throughout school. Then I went to, had to choose. I chose rugby, but I was sad to give up football. I ironically wasn't sad to give up playing football. I was sad to have to give up playing rugby, but I had so many concussions and other injuries. Even at the age of 21, 22, my body was broken. Um, I miss playing a little bit, but at the same time, I prefer watching. Jackie Robinson did track, baseball, football, and basketball at UCLA. Was his breaking of the colour barrier, which was passed. I think each nation has its own player from a minority background that's broken down barriers. You've got Aboriginal players in Australia, in AFL and Nrl who've done it. Obviously, you've had you know Jackie Robinson and others in the US. I forget who the baseball player was. Willie O'Ree with the Boston Bruins in ice hockey. Um, what you would call the colour barrier or the racial barrier, I think every sport has had its. With Anderson being the first black player to play for England, I think every sport has had that barrier broken down at some point. Aaron Burch will be the first white player to play for Trinidad and Tobago in football, by the way, while he was a Port Vale player in 2006. I think every sports have that barrier broken down. I think baseball's the one. With the worst history when it comes to race relations with the N word league, which I don't like using. With the blacks only league. I think baseball's got the worst history when it comes to breaking down ethnic minority barriers or participation barriers. And yeah, I have my views on that. But I think every sport. I mean, the South African team in football and in rugby union in the mid 90s did wonders for breaking down a lot of barriers, and they've hosted both World Cups and they've won rugby union World Cup 3 times. And Kilosi, the current captain, from a native background. So Brian Habana, mixed race background, one of the best players of all time. Chester Williams, one of the best centres of the 90s. Obviously, had a very short international career because of apartheid, but they've definitely done it. I mean, 2% of kids in the UK will go on to sign a scholarship for a football club. Well, get into a football academy. Yeah, the way out is small, but it's unfortunately professional sport not. I think it's somewhere between like 2 to 5% of kids will end up being a professional athlete out of school in this country or something like that. Every school year or something. It's very low, maybe even lower than that. And out of those that do go through club systems, it's around 2 to 5% will make it to the senior squad for at least one appearance. So yes, the making it to the professional ranks, yeah, it a lot of them get thrown into the scrap heap, and a lot of them do give up on the sport by the age of 21. Yorkshire County Cricket Club could bridge between communities in Yorkshire. They finished. Yeah, Darren Goff's obviously now involved in I think a director of cricket capacity. They've cleared out a lot of the former board coaching staff. Yorkshire, I think, has got a lot of structural problems anyway that led to the scandal being what it was. I think there's other issues at play, but when you've got ex-players like Jeffrey Boycott, unknown, domestic violence, convicted domestic violence, it's not really your best role models, really. Um, 2 to 5% seems streaming. It's it may seem that way, but um, there's been surveys done that suggest most, especially women, um, a lot of them, the continuation of playing sport even at amateur level drops off significantly, and it's higher in the female demographic than the male demographic, and it's even higher in minority groups as well. Our post education, the drop off is off a cliff. So um, participation post education in this country, I think, in the developed world, there is a notable drop off um, post education, and it is higher in minority groups, and especially in the female demographic. And then you can break down, you know, the, the breakdown of socioeconomic and uh, nationality backgrounds. You fall off a cliff. So surveys have been done. So 2 to 5% seems about right. I don't think it's high. I think it's about right. On the women's side of things, we're carrying on to team sports at semi-pro and pro level, because obviously there's less professional female athletes than male athletes. It's even lower than that. That continue on playing post education. It's even lower than that. We're talking less than 1.5% at best. Josh De Silva, I think, yeah, no, I'm not sure. I think there have been before. About, I think, like 10% of West Indians in the Caribbean, in the Anglo, French, Dutch speaking communities, um, uh, in those nations are white. So you would think he cannot be the only one. I think he's obviously a big name now because of what he did in the recent Test series, but there are other white players who played for the West Indies in their history. Um, Not many though. Not many, but there are many involved in the administration side of the sport and in the media side of the sport. Um, there is that. The Zimbabwean rugby team does have a lot of white players, but Zimbabwean sport's a mess. Let's not even go into Zimbabwean sport because of the political situation in Zimbabwe. It's a mess. Um, the cricket team's in a shambles. The rugby team's a shambles. The football team's a shambles. Sport in Zimbabwe is an absolute mess, and a lot of the mixed race and white athletes don't live in Zimbabwe. They train overseas for safety reasons. They don't feel comfortable necessarily training in Zimbabwe. It's not a very safe country. The 2010 World Cup is Africa. What they have to show for it, FIFA need to look at that before giving more World Cups to develop the game. South African football's a bit of a mess, to be honest. But that is also a legacy of apartheid. A little bit, because they had some brilliant players in the 80s and 90s, but they couldn't represent themselves on the international stage. Same with rugby union as well, and cricket. There were some brilliant South African players who never actually really got to achieve their international potentials. England women's cricket team are all white. You could argue that, and that is the biggest demographic of women who have a drop off post education with sports participation. That's the thing. Best thing about the 2010 World Cup was the music, waving the flag and waka waka were legend at the time. Brendan Nash did play for the West Indies. I forgot about him. I'm gonna have to look at some of the history of West Indian cricket. But yeah, about 10% of those who classify themselves as West Indian are white, and there's a big white population in Barbados. Big white population in Barbados for percentage of population. The, then again, cricket is seen as a very middle class to upper class sport, so that's already putting barriers in place. It's a stereotype. It's putting barriers in place. Even though a lot of the players are actually working class lads and girls, but it's seen as a very posh sport. Same with rugby union. There's a false stereotype about, you've got to be middle class or upper class and white to play. It's BS, absolute BS. The 2010 World Cup was not a great World Cup. Eugene Melnick hung out in Barbados all the time and had a bar there. It's Eugene Melnick though, and he died of liver failure. So the irony of that. and he had, I think, 2 liver transplants because he was an alcoholic. Um, Eugene Melnick, he's a very. I mean, I know he's obviously recently passed away, so we shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but he was a very divisive figure, and Ottawa Senators fans didn't particularly like him. And he was a very divisive figure when it came to his ownership of the team, the direction the team has taken, the issues over the arena, comments he made about possibly moving the team to a different location or selling the team. Seen as a bit cheap when it came to contracts. Obviously, what's happened with Eugene Melnick is obviously very sad. He has died, but he was an alcoholic. Let's be let's be a bit fair on that. There's a reason why he had multiple liver transplants. Is he liked to drink. Um, Hence why he owned a bar in Barbados. You don't buy a bar if you're a teetotaler. Let's just say that. But yeah, Eugene Melnick, a very divisive character. His ownership of the Senators, we could have a look at his the state of the Ottawa Senators, contract issues with players, players feeling that they could get paid a better salary at another team, be it a Canadian or US market. It's yeah, very very divisive with the fan base. Wasn't one of those owners you love to hate. I wouldn't say he was a bad owner necessarily, but he's one of those owners you can't help but dislike. Very divisive, very controversial. But a lot of team owners are very controversial and chalk and cheese kind of. You either love them, hate them. From what I can gather from Senators fans, he wasn't overly popular with the fan base from very early on into his ownership of the team. Uh, Other owners seem to have a better rapport with their fan base. Eugene Melnick, I just don't think the fans really he got on. Yeah, got on with Eugene Melnick. I don't think the fans ever felt that the direction he wanted to take the team was what they wanted the team direction to take. It was a love hate relationship from the beginning. But there's been other sports teams where the owners haven't been particularly well liked by the fan base. And as a Blackburn Rovers fan, I can tell you that for a fact. We don't like the Venkies. Let's just say that. Blackpool with the Oystons when they were in charge. Man United with the Glazers when Gillette and Hicks were in charge of Liverpool. When Randy Lerner was in charge of Villa. Cellini with Leeds. Milan Mandrich with Sheffield Wednesday and Portsmouth. There have been owners of football clubs in this country where the fans have never trusted or felt that the relationship between the ownership and the fans was never great. I think that the biggest dislike of owners right now is I think the Glazers with Man United and Morshy, but Morshy with Everton I don't think has ever been a positive relationship. But Everton have got themselves in a mess for years and years and years of mismanagement. Even Bill Kenwright is part of the problem, not the solution. There's been talk about moving away from Goodison for 25 years. And leaving Goodison, which I think would be a massive mistake. That's my personal opinion on that. But the situation at Everton has been a long time coming. I think again you have to question how strongly enforced the director's test actually is. And we can say Abramovich at Chelsea or Sheikh Mansour at Man City. It's great for those clubs. They've got a lot of success. Okay, Chelsea fans, they can love Abramovich all they want, but for football, is that a good thing? No. That's my opinion. There's already a lot of question marks about the planning application for the stadium with Liverpool City Council and the corruption investigation and the fact that the mayor of Liverpool's been arrested and there's all sorts of issues. I would say the Leicester and Southampton ownership groups the fans seem to. Southampton don't really have much issue with who owns the club because the club's stable, and Leicester, the ownership family, the family who own Leicester and the fan base love each other. I think that's the best relationship between fans and ownership. There's not a lot of dispute there. Fenway Sports Group, I think there's a mixed reception with Liverpool fans. There's been a lot of negativity as well as positivity, with a lot of issues. Man City, I think, have a decent rapport with their owners, but there are issues with Man City that need looking at. Same with Newcastle United, with the current ownership, with the man stably involved. Um, while it's not Mike Ashley, which is what Newcastle fans wanted was Mike Ashley gone. I think, yeah, we'll see what happens. Sullivan Gold at West Ham, there's been mixed relationship between them and the fans throughout their tenure. Um, I, it's a difficult one. I think Wolves. I think they're quite happy with their ownership group. Quite frankly, I think it's a difficult one because I think Palace are quite happy with their ownership right now because there's more stability at the club and there's a direction that the club are going to invest at, Sellers Park and so forth. Uh, in Brentford have been on a bit of a journey under the current owners, but the direction the club is taking is the right one. And look, they're not getting relegated this season. How is Peter Ridsdale still chairman of Preston North End? Well, he's destroyed Leeds, and who else was he chairman of? Peter Ridsdale. He was involved with another club as well. I don't know how Peter Ridsdale. There are some people involved in football, be it domestic or overseas, who just shouldn't be involved in football. Peter Ridsdale is one of those people. Um, um, yeah, I don't know how Peter Ridsdale is still involved in football after the Leeds United debacle and the mess he left Leeds United in at the beginning of the century. Yes, that's how long ago Peter Ridsdale was involved with Leeds. He's been involved with another club as well. I forget what the other club was. Um, um, yeah, I do agree it's a cultural thing with women, Asian women in cricket, but you've got to remember there's Sikhs and Hindus as well, and Christians in India and Buddhists, and same in Pakistan and Bangladesh. It's a cultural thing. Although I think the Indian women's cricket team is doing a lot to change that perception. Um, I think the Bangladeshi women's team as well are doing quite well in changing that perception of South Asian women in cricket. They are going a long way into changing that perception. The Indian women's cricket team is actually one of the best women teams out there. Bangladeshi team, women's team, are doing quite well. The Sri Lankans have a decent women's setup, so they are sort of changing that perception. Um, but domestically in this country, there is women in general, girls, when they finish education and compulsory sports in their education, there is a marked drop off of participation post education, even on an amateur level and such. Um, and especially in urban inner city areas where you have higher mixed populations of various backgrounds and social economic backgrounds. And the biggest known drop off is in the South Asian communities, Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Sri Lankan, Nepalese. That's where there's a massive drop off in participation post education when it's no longer compulsory. That's a known fact. Studies have proven that. So I'm being a realist. I'm being very honest here. Studies have been done, and that's where the biggest drop off is. Um, Now, why is that? Is it cultural? Most likely, yes. Um, that's not because necessarily of their religion, but I do think it is a very, very cultural thing. Um, so we'll see. The 100, as much as you don't like it, I don't think many people don't like it. It's not just me. You would ask majority of cricket fans, that's not what they want to solve the problems of cricket. And the ECB have admitted it's a financial money pit. it's not making, because of COVID, and they already admitted the first 2 years they were lucky to break even. By the second year would be lucky to break even. The first year was going to make a loss, so after the first 2 years they're making a loss. Um, um, it's a money pit, and COVID's exacerbated that. And this is a organisation, a professional sports organisation that's had an emergency loan from the government, and yeah, that's sinking with the direction. Ridsdale was involved with Leeds, Barnsley. I know Cardiff. That's the one. So Leeds, yeah, okay. Administration. Barnsley. It's been a rocky road for Barnsley since they left the Premier League, hasn't it? Cardiff and Plymouth. All four of those clubs have had real struggles financially off the field. Um, Three of them have been in the Premier League. Plymouth almost have gone bust. Leeds have almost gone bust. Barnsley are struggling on the field right now and have had some financial problems in the past. And Cardiff have also had financial problems in the past. And he's been involved with all four of them. So it does make you wonder why he's still allowed to be active in football under the director's test, being a chairman, because makes people wonder, doesn't it? I'm not saying anything or excluding anyone, but my point is to say we are in men's cricket, but not women's elite cricket in England. As I said in regards to participation surveys, women, there's a higher marked drop off post education, and it's most noticeable in the South Asian community of all backgrounds and religions. It's just known. It's a known fact. Now, why that happens is participation surveys have shown this. That doesn't mean they're not fans of the sport and they won't watch the sport and be actively involved in going to games, watching with their families. Participation is a different thing from observation. Now, surveys have also shown that participation in sports drops off, more likely participation drops off in inner city urban areas. Another fact. So yeah, we're seeing more in football and rugby for England. Maybe cricket's a problem for Asia. Cricket's in carnage anyway. The ECB have done enough damage to cricket, but surveys have proven across the sports spectrum, be it amateur, semi-pro, professional, the drop-off is there. It's very marked in inner city areas and in South Asian communities, and especially in women. And the drop-off rate for women post-education is higher than men and boys, and girls and women, and it's most pronounced in the South Asian community. Simple facts. The reasons why that happens, there could be a multitude of reasons, but they're the simple facts that surveys have proven over many years, from many university surveys through to the FA, the RFU, the RFL, English ice hockey, ECB, doesn't matter what sport governing body, does the survey to work out grassroots participation, growth of sport, because obviously they want to attract sponsors and investment. So look, we've got a growing sport here, which is ice hockey is doing that. ECB is the other way, it's shrinking. They do all these surveys to work out how to best market their product, encourage growth in the game, participation, and every participation survey that they look at, the market drop off in girls and women participating in sport is higher post education, and drop off in inner city areas is higher than in suburban and rural areas. And the South Asian community has the most drop off, and especially in women. The reasons why that happens, multiple questions you could ask. Is it cultural? Is it financial? Financial economical? Is it just because it doesn't actually interest them, which could be a cultural thing as well? Is it because they're more likely to start a family younger? All that kind of stuff. There's a whole host of reasons, but the simple fact state is it's the case. Do I think the Peterborough Phantoms will ever join the Elite Hockey League? Look, Um, Basingstoke did for a couple of years, didn't do them very well, and they also play in a Planet Ice arena. So there you go. I think they're quite happy with where they are right now. Um, um, if Pakistan and Bangladesh only allow things recently, government they made to have a look. Well, obviously there's enough who. I don't like forced driven diversity. I don't like governments forcing people to do things and trying to. It has to come from the grassroots and the community itself, and there has to be community-led um, involvement. Uh, whenever I when I was living in where I used to live before, the local South Asian male community would be playing grandparents, parents, and kids, and the women will go along and watch. So there's a big Sri Lankan and South Indian population where I used to live, and all the men of all ages, from kids through to the grandparents, would be playing a bit of cricket, bit of quick cricket in the field, and the women and the girls would actually watch their men play. The local cricket club, again, a lot of women are watching from all backgrounds while the men play. So they clearly are fans of the sport and enjoy, watching the sport. Whether they feel that they want to play the sport's a different thing. You can't say, "Well, why are you not playing?" Because I don't want to. Quite literally, it's like you could ask me, "Why am I not playing basketball?" Because I don't want to. That's you. That could be the answer. Is I don't want to. I rather watch as a fan rather than participate as a person. Have you thought of that? This is what I had this argument before about why we don't see more South Asian football players. And my answer was they'll be probably more interested in field hockey and cricket to play. It's a thing, It's called personal choice. And this guy got really animated saying, we're all racist. It's like, no, the Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi community would rather play cricket and field hockey because that's the sports they play back home anyway. So it is a cultural thing. Um, but what is interesting is when I would watch, you know, them play, the women are watching them play and actually are quite enjoying watching them play. So you could also be personal choice of I'm just a fan. If you were to ask me, if let's say Major League Baseball was to do a European survey of baseball fans or sports fans and go, or whatever sport, or a university was doing an online survey about what sports do you like? Have you participated? Have you played in the past? Would you play again? And they asked me what sports do I like, what sports do I don't like, and why. I don't like playing it. I rather watch. You could have that answer. You might actually honestly get, or you might actually get some girls. Uh, I liked netball, but I was focused on my education. I have a career. I don't have time. You you could honestly argue that I'd rather just be a fan. Could be the answer from a lot of them. Iran banning women. That's a domestic political issue. Iranian nationals. If you are of Iranian heritage, but you've got a British passport, you can. There are ways around it. Um, Look, they are a Shiite country, and actually, there's a geopolitical thing with Iran and Qatar anyway. I'm not joking on that, and Saudi Arabia in the Gulf region. Um, it's a complicated political issue, but this is FIFA, and FIFA knows that the USA versus Iran is going to get a lot of eyes on it, not because of the quality of the match, it's because the two countries hate each other. And the fact that Iran is qualified for Qatar, again, it's going to be a lot of eyes on the Iranians being a Shiite Islamic country and Qatar being a Sunni Islamic country. And a lot of the Iranian government don't like the Qatari government and vice. They don't like each other very much. So, yeah, the fact we're actually playing the World Cup in Qatar is in itself an issue. Uh, let's be honest. Um, but obviously, FIFA haven't decided to reward the World Cup, and we're going because of money. And the USA-Iran is actually going to be quite a popular match to watch, simply because the two countries politically hate each other. Uh, um, you don't buy the fact that South Asian women are, but the South Asian community in general is underrepresented in professional sport in this country and in professional sports outside of South Asia. It's a thing. Um, Multiple reasons for it. Apart from cricket and field hockey, they just aren't interested in playing other sports, be it male or female, and doesn't matter the religious or ethnic background they have. Um, I've noticed that at school we had Indian and Pakistani and Bangladeshi and Sri Lankan kids play other sports like football and rugby, but when it came to cricket and field hockey, they destroyed us. They were the best players we had, but when it came to football and rugby, they weren't really. They didn't put the effort in. They didn't enjoy it. They didn't enjoy watching it. They didn't enjoy playing it. And I went to school with a lot of Asian kids. I did, and some of my best friends are Indian and Sikh and Hindu and Muslim and all that. And this is just a fact. And it's not because they were given the opportunities. They have been given the opportunities at school. They just don't enjoy playing it. I'm being serious. Football and rugby, the South Asian kids, they played because it was compulsory. They weren't very good, not because they weren't sporty. They had no enjoyment for what they were doing. They really were not interested at all. Um, uh, but when it came to cricket and field hockey, they were lights out. They were some of the best players we had. They were lights out, and they enjoyed playing it. Maybe because a brother or an uncle or a cousin or their dad, and they were the best we had, and I'm not joking. Our cricket teams were dominated by the Asian players. Our field hockey teams, half the team was Asian, and that was an optional sport as well. And I noticed when it came to playing rugby or field hockey, more of the Asian kids chose field hockey. It was a no-brainer, and there you go. That's where they're interested. So we didn't have many Asian girls at my school, though. But when it came to the sports, you had a choice of rugby and field hockey. Most of the Asian lads chose field hockey, and they were lights out, and they were scary good. So there is a cultural thing now. It it depends how forward thinking their families are, but I tell you now, I noticed that the South Asian, so the Indian, Sri Lankan, Pakistani, Bangladeshi kids, honestly when it came to football and rugby, they weren't as it wasn't as if they didn't enjoy playing, but you could see the effort wasn't there. You could see their heart wasn't truly in it. I mean, they were playing because it's the national sports, but you could see their passion wasn't truly in it. Didn't matter if they were good or bad. They just could tell their energy levels and their passion wasn't truly in it. But when it came to the sports that back home in India or back home in Pakistan are the two big sports, which are cricket and field hockey, they were lights out. They were lights out. You couldn't get near them. You couldn't touch them with a barge pole. They would skin you alive on the hockey field. And cricket wise, they were so far superior. It was because they had the passion for it. They you could see that they were putting 120, 130% in. They were didn't matter if they were good or bad. They really had the energy for it. So I honestly believe there's a reason why we have a lack of Asian players playing football in this country and rugby. It's because they don't have an interest in it. It's not because they haven't got the opportunity to play it at school, because they do. They just don't have the interest in it, broadly speaking. Now, when it comes to the female side of it and the girls and the women, that's a bit more of a complicated issue. And yes, there are some cultural issues there and cultural reasons why, for good or for bad. But when I do actually get to watch field hockey at the Olympics or cricket, you will see a lot of female Asian fans in the stands from all the South Asian nations. So they obviously love watching it. Whether they like playing it or not, or want to play it or not, is a different matter altogether. But what I've noticed is they do generally enjoy watching cricket, and they do generally enjoy watching field hockey. I remember at school, the Asian girls would happily watch cricket and field hockey, happily support, their school team when we were playing against an opposition, happily. And it's the same when I go down the local park, when I have a walk, and there's an Asian family playing a little bit of quick cricket with the kids, the parents and the grandparents. The girls and the women will happily watch, and you can see the joy of them in watching. They just don't want to play, and it's not as if they haven't got the opportunity, because this is the thing. It's the opportunities are there, and they obviously, if it's compulsory sport, they will participate. And Asian families are very, very pushy parents. I will tell you that they will. If you're good at something, they will definitely be very, very demanding. If you're very, very good at something, um, it's whether they actually enjoy doing it. And I noticed with football and rugby, the Asian lads, they didn't enjoy doing it as much. There were some who were really, really good. I'm not saying they're all bad, but when it came to cricket, you could see their passion levels go through the roof, and they did enjoy it, and they were good, really good. So, in my opinion, if I was to be asked, okay, here's all the sports. Do I play basketball? I would say no. Do I watch basketball? I would say no. And there's your answer. If I was to go and do a survey locally, there's an Asian guy I work with, and I said, "Do you like football?" So I watch it. I don't really play it. I used to watch it. I'm not really interested. There you go. I asked him straight up, and he was like, "There you go." So there's your answer. And Asian parents are ridiculously demanding. So, and Oriental parents are as well. They are ridiculously demanding of their kids. To be, it's a cultural thing. They're ridiculously demanding. But if you were to ask the question anonymously, give out a survey, your answer would be, I prefer watching over playing, or I don't have the time. And I mean, the thing is, a friend of mine, my mate Manny, he's a Scottish Pakistani from by birth. He's born in Glasgow, lives in Slough, and he plays in a five-a-side league with his mates. So there is participation, and they have a lot of fun doing it. He has four jobs. He's a banker by day. He's a car salesman as a licensed trader as a hobby. He's a property developer, and he helps his dad manage several corner shops that they own countrywide that they have franchises for. So he has four jobs, and he does security as well. So to fit that in his busy schedule, but he's a very driven man. But he still makes time for a bit of five-a-side. So yes, there is participation there, but it's for a bit of fun with the lads. They also do a bit of cricket as well, and they like their boxing. So Asian men and women are sports fans, but they're very driven people, and they're very business orientated. So it's finding that spare time as well. And in the summer, cricket's the perfect thing down the park. Um, in the winter, bit of five-a-side footy. It is a thing, but there is a reason why we are seeing a lack of South Asian football players in the UK. There is. Um, Partly because they're more interested in other sports, and partly a time thing. So you could throw out as many surveys as you want and as many grassroots projects as you want, but if they're not interested, it's pointless wasting money in an area where that money could be spent on a different community or a different sporting infrastructure project or youth project. It's all well and good saying, right, we'll try and encourage as many as possible. If they're not interested, it's a waste of time. It really is. Know your demographic, know what they're interested in, and then focus on improving the facilities of the sports they do like. It's a no-brainer. You have to do it from grassroots outreach, and not have government do it, but actually have the professional sports do it. They know what their fan base is. They really do know what their demographic fan base is. They don't need a government survey to tell them that. Cricket knows, and field hockey knows, the South Asian community is a solid fan base that they can invest in. Football knows the inner city working class communities of all backgrounds is their fan base. Hence why most players come from those locations. Rugby union knows it's a middle class suburban sport. Rugby league knows it's a working class sport of all backgrounds, rural or urban, up north. They know what their core fan base is. They know the areas that they could grow the sport in. So it's all well and good. It's like asking the Hispanic population why they don't like ice hockey because they love baseball. It's like asking why African Americans don't like winter sports because the majority of African Americans live in the deep south or the east coast of the US. It's a no-brainer. The climate and the culture is American football, basketball. Who knew? It's like asking the Scandinavian Americans why they don't like baseball because ice hockey. Um, sometimes it is socio-economic, and it sort of makes logical sense why certain socio-economic or nationality groups like certain things. Don't force an agenda that doesn't need to be forced. Allow them to naturally go, actually, I do like this. I might give it a go. Allow it to naturally happen. Don't force it. Forced agendas don't work. Doesn't work. It creates resistance. Too much negative and division. Um, we'll see what happens with the women's Euros this summer, and what how the fan demographics break down, socioeconomic, ethnic background, age, gender. Because I bet you a lot of fair few men go as well, and break it down. And see what it's like. Rugby league. I think there's not much money in rugby league in the UK and France, but in Australia there is. There's more pathways in Australia, and the women's game in Australia is going from strength to strength. So I think the Aussies have got it right over there. We've got it horribly wrong over here. But they knew there was an interest. They knew girls and women wanted to play the game. They're starting to make it professional. They've listened to their fan base. They've listened to there are girls and women setting up teams and wanting to play. Let's put pathways in place. Kind of allowed it to develop naturally, and then you come in with here's the pathways. Here's the way to get to the top. Whereas forcing it doesn't work. You've got to allow it to grow naturally. And if there's suddenly a demand for women's teams and girls' teams, then you create the structures. You don't put the structures in place for no one to fill it. Sort of, you've got to allow things. You've got to allow the pressure to force you to put the pathways in, rather than force the pathways on people who don't want it. See, I don't mind watching this women's team under the new manager. They must appeal to young girls across the country. Well, considering how the last 5 years has gone for the women's game with the Mark Sampson situation, the Phil Neville era, and now you've got a successful coach who's won with the US. I believe it was the US former US women's manager at one point, and she's also worked with Norway and Germany and other. Looking at how it's been mismanaged, and I will say this, it has been mismanaged. There's clearly an interest for women wanting to play the game. However, the way they've gone about, here, we'll put the structure in place before we're ready, rather than, okay, now we've got enough of a player pool to allow the structures to, okay, Dutch. I knew she coached more than, I think she had been involved with the US as well, but I know that she was involved with one of the European nations. I was born in a working class town, so I follow football. Yet, if I was born 20 miles down the road, middle class, uni-based Worcester, I probably would have been a rugby fan. It is what it is. When I watch football or rugby, the crowds are close to 100% white. I think it'd be no, not in my experience. When I've gone to games, I think it does depend on team and location. And again, I think it depends on team and location. And I think it's a bit of a stereotype. However, that doesn't mean minority groups aren't going to games or watching. I've been to cricket, and I can tell you now it is a very mixed bag at cricket. You get some right characters, and you get everyone from almost every economic background and national background you can think of at cricket. Um, I think it's an interesting one. I think it depends on the location. Uh, it does honestly, and it depends on the sport for fans in attendance and their background, socioeconomic and such. Um, I think the most diverse crowd I've seen for me was ice hockey in London. Was a very diverse crowd. Um, when I went to see Streatham play Bracknell Bees, Streatham Redhawks at Streatham, that was a very mixed crowd of, I think it was about 2,000 people inside. Very mixed. You know why? Because it's in inner city London. Inner city London will do that. Um, um, and so again, I think it depends on location and team and interest. You know, of I think Arsenal is quite a mixed. Arsenal and Tottenham have got quite a mixed fan base um, because of the area of London they're in. Brighton, I think, has got quite a mixed fan base. Man United, I know Man United definitely have a fair Asian backing in Manchester. I think Birmingham City is quite a mixed fan base historically. It honestly does vary from location to location and club to club and team to team and sport to sport. It it's one of them. It all depends on look, if you're in the West Country, outside of Bristol, you're gonna find yeah, it's probably the most white area of the UK you could possibly find. Um, down in Devon, and Dorset and Somerset. Whereas in the bigger urban areas like Manchester, Birmingham, London, um, Bradford, Leeds, you're going to get a more mixed fan base because of of the locations. Um, whereas in the small towns in Lancashire, again, um, Scotland, it's just Leicester's quite a mixed fan base. I know that much. Leicester's very mixed fan base. Um, it honestly varies from location to location. Um, the smaller regional cities and towns, there's less of a mixed fan base. It's just how socio-economic and demographics work, and population demographics work. Um, but no, Leicester's the most multicultural city in the UK, and they have a very multicultural fan base, and they're very proud of that. Birmingham City, very multicultural fan base, and they're very proud of that in their club's history. So Arsenal and Tottenham, multicultural fan bases. They're very proud of that, and they're proud of their rivalry as well, which is bordering on comical at times. But it honestly varies on a lot of reasons. A lot of things are in play. Man United's got a big Asian fan base. I think Man City do as well, to a degree. Um, yeah, Preston, Blackburn. They're very mixed communities, um, and have a large South Asian following. Um, Peterborough is a Polish city, not an Englishman. Um, I wouldn't say that way. Peterborough is just not a pleasant place. It's not on my list of vacation destinations. Let's just say that. Um, but then Cambridgeshire is a very dull county. There's not a lot to do in Cambridgeshire. It's very flat, floods a lot. Um, I've been to Cambridge, and while Cambridge is pleasant, um, yeah, it's very flat. Not overly interesting countryside. Uh, Peterborough is Peterborough. Yeah, there is a Peterborough is like the Cambridgeshire version of Slough. Um, but as I say, like there's a lot of English cities not on my bucket. Most English cities are not on my bucket list. I think I've done the ones I want to do. Uh, um, but it is what it is. I mean, like a team's fandom demographics, economic demographics, socioeconomic groups, and population demographics go a long way to work out how a fan base works. Um, Newcastle, Bristol, Warwick, only most cities are. Um, Warwick isn't a city, by the way. Doesn't have city status. And I've been there. Nice castle. Bristol, shithole. Newcastle, very drunk. Um, Newcastle's one of the highest percentage of alcoholism and alcohol related violence in the UK. Uh, Passionate fan base for their football club, um, the Geordie Army. And ironically, I mean, most Geordies that I've come across are actually a really friendly bunch as well. Outside of if you take football out aside, um, they are a really friendly bunch. I I get on with I don't know what it is about the northeast, but I get on with people from the northeast really, really well. I find them out of all the regions of the UK, people from the northeast, like Newcastle, Hartlepool, Sunderland, Tyne and Wear, Borough. Um, I actually find them the most friendly people in the UK. I've got a lot of friends from Newcastle and Sunderland. Don't ask me why. Um, I find them the most welcoming people. And they are fighting people as well, but I do find them the nicest people. They've got like an enthusiasm for life at the same time, being also equally dour at the same time. There's something about the northeast. I don't know what's in there's something in the water, probably the teas or the tine or something. Probably all the mining pollutants, but they seem to be very friendly people. One of my best mates is from Newcastle. One of my best mates is from Sunderland, and quite honestly, they are what I call the salt of the earth people. I wouldn't swap them for the world. And like my godparents were from Newcastle, County Durham. Well, one of them was from Newcastle, one was from County Durham. Is Newcastle significantly colder than the southern cities? It's on the coast, and therefore it'd be a bit warmer than the inland cities. Newcastle's just Newcastle. Um, Newcastle is just a. It's just they are so. I don't know what it is. Take football out of the equation um, when it comes to the northeast, because all the clubs hate each other, all the fan bases hate each other when it comes to football. Take out of the equation. They are really friendly people. Um, you have to get past the confusing accents because they all sound very similar, but they're not. I sworn you, they're not. A Geordie and a Mackem are different, and a monkey hanger are all different. Yes, if you're from Hartlepool, you call a monkey hanger. They're all different. Um, a Mackem is someone from Sunderland. A monkey hanger is someone from Hartlepool, and a Geordie is someone from Newcastle. But then you've got Gateshead as well, and then that's a different thing. And then don't don't. But they are. I do find it awkward, but they are so funny as well. Um, and when it comes to sports, they are some of the most passionate sports fans I've ever come across, ever. Um, They are. Football is a religion up there in the northeast. They are some of the most passionate football fans I've ever come across. From Middlesbrough to Newcastle, that entire length of the coastline, um, they are possibly the most passionate football fans I've come across. Um, for better or for worse, and the lack of success that the Northeast has had in recent years when it comes to football, with one trophy in God knows how long, since one trophy since the 70s when Sunderland won the FA Cup, with Middlesbrough winning the League Cup in 2006. It's ridiculous. But they're brilliant. Like the Newcastle fan base is brilliant. The Sunderland fan base is brilliant. The Hartlepool fan base is brilliant. The Middlesbrough fan base is brilliant. You know, I wouldn't. I they're just a fun kind of. They're just full of fun up there. There's something about the northeast. I don't know what it is. It's completely different. Don't watch Geordie Shore. Don't save yourself a lot of gouging your eyes out. It's like Jersey Shore in the US. Don't plastic. No, don't. Not. It's not what the northeast is all about. I can assure you that. A proper Geordie is completely different to Geordie Shore. Don't watch it. Save yourself the ignominy of rotting your brain for an hour, please. Um, but no, honestly, just don't make him suffer through that. It's almost as bad as the only way is Essex. I would rather our American brethren did not suffer with our crap reality TV. That I Something Until I Die is probably a better a better. It just shows you the no matter how good or bad the team is, how much it means to the working class people of Sunderland, the Mackham. Um, it really means something to the community, their football club, and that's possibly there's a football show I watch on Twitch and YouTube called The Kickoff, and there's a Geordie on there. It's a very yeah. The northeast is the complete opposite to the southeast, and the northeast is completely different to the northwest. In just their outlook on life. Um, the best way to look at it. Their outlook on life is different, completely different. There is no way other way to describe the um, their outlook on things. And for whatever reason, every other sport is secondary in the northeast. It's football. I mean, the Newcastle Falcons are a decent rugby union side. You've got Gateshead in rugby league, but quite frankly, football is a religion up there. Absolute religion, and they wouldn't have it any other way. I find Scousers quite depressing as well, and Brummies. Yeah, it's just the accent. Although everyone I know from the West Midlands is actually a really positive person. Don't. I'm not joking. The Brummie accent is very depressing, but every Brummie I know is a really positive person with a good sense of humour. It's just how it is. But if you want to know what a sport means to a region, the northeast of England and football and what it means it's something else. And while County Durham are good at cricket, and while Newcastle and Gateshead also play rugby league and rugby union, it's just football. Association football is a religion up there. Surfing on Newcastle. No, Newcastle in Australia is different. Um, um, Newcastle, England is different to Newcastle, Australia. Yes, you don't want to be surfing in the North Sea, but you want to be surfing on the Great Barrier Reef just off the coast of Newcastle. Different Newcastle. There's two Newcastles in the world. One's Australia, one's England. Both have got links to the coal mining industry. The irony of that, and both are on major rivers as well. You can watch an England game at Wembley, then watch another match held in Sunderland Leeds. You can see quite a difference. Yes. I'm from Birmingham. Studley's the one that really gives you a brain tumour. There's a Newcastle. Oh God, even the US have got a Newcastle. Oh dear. Um, two are bad enough. Well, not a third. No, but Newcastle, Australia is very similar to Newcastle here in England. Industrial city, mining city, port city, and sits on a very important river valley. There you go. The irony is there. Anyway, I'm going to call that an evening. It's been some brilliant banter this evening. We've really ended on, I think, a fun note, discussing the finer points of regional accents, and I think Dan is going to struggle to understand. Yeah, we do have a Washington in Sunderland. We do have a Washington in between Sunderland and Newcastle. Don't. Um, yeah, no, let's not confuse him any further. Um, please, no. Uh, um, but the US has a Manchester as well. Just putting it out there, and a Birmingham in the deep south. Yes, yeah, we won't discuss the Birmingham, USA, because race relations there is not as no, it's just as bad as here. Yeah, there's a London on art now. There's a Windsor in Canada, and there's a London in Canada as well, um, and there's a Bracknell in Australia. So there you go. It's the second Bracknell in the world, and yeah, um, but there's only one Slough. Um, Yeah, well, it's 10 o'clock at night, and I've got to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning, so I've got to be up in 6 hours. So I'm hungry, gonna have some dinner, and I'm gonna chill out and get some sleep. But yeah, really appreciate. We've ended on a fun note, um, but yeah, it's goodbye from me. Also, check out Newcastle, Australia. They are religious about rugby league. It's a religion in Newcastle, Australia. The Newcastle Knights. It's a religion over there. Two championships a few years apart, 4 years apart, and they had a period where they were one of the best teams in Australia, and one of the best ever players played for them in Andrew Joey Johns. So check out Andrew Johns highlights on NRL highlights on YouTube. One of the best halfbacks ever to play the game. Matty Johns, his brother, older brother, hilarious, decent player, not world class. Andrew Joey Johns, best halfback in the history of the game. Check out his highlights package. It's ridiculous what he could do. And he played one grand final with a punctured lung. I think it was the 97 grand final. He basically had a punctured lung and a broken ribs. So he really was one of the best players. And thank you very much for everything. And I'll have more videos for you very, very soon.